everything else, I was hopeless, to be honest. I'm dyslexic and I just really struggled academically. My teacher was adamant that I was just stupid. That was her take on it. Leaving school at 16, just rejection. And then finally, that lucky break, we realised I'm not stupid.
We know that the cybersecurity industry is, panicking about quantum computers that don't even exist yet. But if you ask most enterprises, they won't really even be able to tell you how many laptops are running on their network.
Security specialists do get so excited about the next shiny thing.
10% of our organisations, enterprise level, their devices are completely undetectable, and a further 30% are perhaps falling silent. Their multi-million-pound investment stack is effectively unplugged.
I really see this problem as it's like death by 1,000 cuts.
How the attacker arm themselves with nothing but good English and a phone call to bypass enterprise-grade security. What really happened, John?
And the list goes on. I mean, look at the Irish Health Office attack. That was another classic.
What's the biggest F-up you've seen or heard of in most recent times?
The McDonald's hiring app. So 65 million people. The username was 123456 and the password was 123456 for the admin console of that platform.
It's a tough one to beat, that.
Big mess.
I mean, it's just mind-blowing. We're actually sort of devoting energy to this when someone just phoned up and said, yeah, this is me, I need to reset the MFA.
Let's talk about vibe coding. Our developers are, prompting AI, until the code seemingly works. Are we building a fragile digital infrastructure where literally nobody understands the underlying logic of our, critical systems?
Can't see it being any other way. We're going to see some disasters.
Look at level 1, level 2 SOC analysts, and are these roles that are going to be antiquated very quickly in the next few years?
I mean, I think the entire workforce is going to change beyond all recognition in the next sort of 2 to 5 years. It does seem very unlikely that those roles are going to remain.
If there's other founders that could take some advice listening to this, and could overhaul maybe one single process tomorrow to escape the sophistication paradox that we've talked about, what's that one step that they need to take?
I'm looking at that risk register and looking at it with a fresh perspective and really questioning, okay, is every control exactly where I think it is at that level and why? And I think once you then go through that process and you write down all of those risks, I will be absolutely staggered if quantum computing is going to be at the top of that list.
Fair enough.
Take a step back and be critical. I would just be very surprised that you're going to think that quantum computing is going to be at the top of your list as the biggest risk.
This is a secure CyberConnect podcast with Jay Adamson and Warren Atkinson, where we're joined by information, cybersecurity, technology, HR professionals who share their journeys, unique perspectives and offer advice and guidance. Welcome back to our Cyber Leaders Summit Special Edition series, where we're returning to the summit this April to sit down with the architects of the industry and discuss the bridge between high-level technology and the talent needed to run it. Today, we're thrilled to be joined by John Abbott, CEO and co-founder of ThreatAware. John's a 25-year industry veteran, and he's here to tackle a contradiction that's currently paralysing boardrooms, the cybersecurity sophistication paradox. With over 20-odd years experience in the technology industry, John believes passionately in revolutionising the way businesses stay in control in the ever-evolving cyber landscape, and has led teams in developing cutting-edge solutions to transform asset and security tool management for organisations across the globe. He brings a fresh perspective to security that's very much centred around breach prevention and process. Previously, John's co-founded Priority One, where he saw the critical need for real-time agentless security control monitoring, and it's experiences like this that have made John a cyber generalist with broad technical knowledge and strong commercial awareness. And this has inspired him to design and build new and intuitive solutions to fill this crucial gap in the market. At ThreatAware, he's committed to providing innovative cyber asset management solutions and empower organisations to proactively keep their assets safe from attack, offering a single source of truth Their solution eliminates the burden of asset monitoring for IT teams, ensuring that they can instantly, reliably and accurately discover and protect every cyber asset. We've seen John in action, we've heard him speak at previous summits. Trust me when I say this, we're in for a treat. John, welcome to the Secure Cyber Connect podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you for having me on the podcast today. Very much looking forward to it.
Jay and myself have been really looking forward to it too, John, and of course we look forward to seeing you later this month down in London. And before we get into the heavy-hitting cyber topics, could you perhaps give our audience a brief snapshot of exactly who you are, your journey, and what's led you to finding ThreatAware?
Yeah, definitely. So I've got a young family. They're just starting at the end of primary school. In terms of sort of how I got here, I started work very young. I was working from when I was like 16. And I started we didn't really call it a startup then, back in 97. But yeah, it was a very small business, about 14 people. And just watching them grow so quickly and the energy that they had within the business just really kind of struck a tone with me. I think when I was younger, I always thought that I would own a business. I don't know why, but it just always was something in the back of my mind. But yeah, when I saw that like in front of me, it really did sort of inspire me that that is possible. I was there for about a decade. Then because I sort of, all my friends, they went to uni, they had gap years and all of that, and I still had that itch to scratch. So I actually went traveling for about a year, which was incredible. I recommend that to anyone who gets the opportunity. It just gives you such a great perspective on life. I went to about 20 odd countries. When I came back, I was still in touch with Steve, who was the original founder of that first business. We just went out for a beer and we're talking about what I was doing now, and we decided to start Priority One. So so I co-founded that. That was back in 2007. And then, as Jay sort of mentioned, that was what, midway through about 2018, we came up with the idea of ThreatAware, and then we kind of run those both in parallel, which was immensely stressful. I don't recommend doing that. But it was, clear that our real passion was in the cybersecurity space. And so sold Priority One, and our focus has been, from the moment we sort of saw the initial data when we created the first MVP of ThreatAware, it was clear this was going to be big. So yeah, and that's where we are now. Just looking forward to the future.
Well, I appreciate you sharing. And we also like to look beyond CVs and resumes. Could you perhaps share a moment that you're proud of or excited about that isn't featured on your LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say proud is the word, but that being like leaving school at 16. But it was through, I'm dyslexic, and I just really struggled academically. I was hopeless, to be honest. I just wanted to work. And so started my A-levels, bailed on that. It just wasn't going anywhere. And I was very sort of determined, and I was applying for jobs, and I was even some of the larger companies, I was like, look, I'll work for free for a month. I was like, I can do this, no problem. I'm going to be better than everyone else. Who's going to apply for this role. But just rejection. And then had started at that startup and got that opportunity. I'm pretty proud that I sort of just stuck at it, and now to have co-founded two businesses from that. It's definitely something I'm proud of. But I would say that that timing and luck has a lot to do with it, and I think that's really important for everyone to recognise that you only have so much resilience and willpower, and if you don't get that lucky break before that runs out, then your life can be completely different. And I don't believe for a moment that if I didn't have that lucky break in maybe within a year, that it would have been a completely different story. And I think that's true for most people.
No, I appreciate you sharing. And from a dyslexia standpoint, was that something you went out and got diagnostics yourself? Was it a colleague, a tutor that pointed out to you? Because I know there's a lot in the industry that are still self-doubting in terms of they don't want to waste a doctor's time when it comes to getting these things assessed.
I mean, so back in '97, it really wasn't a thing as much as it is now, which is good. So it was actually I was basically just baffling my mum because I was doing certain things really well, and then I was just like could not spell I just could not spell at all. And so she was just really confused. Like my sister was doing really well in school, and what is wrong? So my teacher was adamant I was just stupid. That was her take on it. And my mum just heard about this thing called dyslexia and said, look, why don't you do a test? So I did a test. And for me, that actually gave me a huge amount of confidence. It really did sort of like, finally, I'm not stupid. Okay, I didn't think I was, but and that gave me a bit of I think it gave me a bit of I'll show you wrong sort of attitude. So.
No, I appreciate you sharing there. And moving on from that, we all make mistakes. It's the lessons that we learn along the way that help us grow, of course. So could you perhaps share with us one of the biggest F-ups, specifically pertaining to cybersecurity, and what was the lesson that you learned along the way in relation to that?
Well, quite a few of those. Obviously, the biggest mistakes you make are at the start of your career, everyone makes mistakes, and they are really important, as you said, for you to be able to learn and grow. The key is not making the same ones multiple times. But one that was pretty major was I was trying to be sort of like super secure with all of our data, and we had a huge. This was back in like about '98. We had a huge file system with all of the images that were accessible through the through the website, which the clients had a portal to. And I decided that it wasn't secure enough and everyone had too much access and I'd lock it down. And so I set it all up and locked it all down. It went through overnight, took ages because there was terabytes upon terabytes of data. And I was really proud of myself and, I'm logging in, everything's looking great. But then I appreciated that I hadn't given the service account that the users have access to be able to read any of those files. So basically the whole service was all of these images, and I locked out every single client to be able to read any of it. And it took about another kind of like 8 hours of processing. That was stressful. But they're one of many, to be honest, at the start.
No, I can imagine. It's trial and error.
Yeah, exactly.
So look, we've talked about we're going to expose the sort of sophistication paradox. Let's get into it a bit more. We know that the cybersecurity industry is panicking about quantum computers that don't even exist yet. There's a lot of talk. We've done a lot of discussions on it ourselves. But if you ask most enterprises, most of them won't really even be able to tell you how many laptops are running on their network. For the benefit of our audience, can you define the cybersecurity sophistication paradox for us?
Yeah, of course. So something that I sort of, I coined the term because I just feel that so many security specialists do get so excited about the next shiny thing. And obviously you need to kind of think about, well, what drew them to the industry in the first place? And I think if you boil it down, it's kind of two things. It's one, that they love solving complicated problems. They love the challenges. But then also there is that really nice feeling when you actually save the day. And if you were the one that actually, were able to stop that person from attacking the organization and you prevented the breach from occurring, and it was sort of like, if you were able to do it at that moment in time, that is a great feeling. And I do think this does kind of fuel this problem. And so when you have so much noise and about all of these complicated, huge problems that you must be facing right now, it does make it very difficult to then take a step back and think, well, hold on, have we actually even done the fundamentals here? Have we actually got the EDR rolled out everywhere? Is everything patched? And that isn't, if you sort of think about the excitement level, you've probably got, I hate to say it, compliance kind of, the most dull, all the way through to like breach prevention. You're the one saving the day. And in the middle would be the breach prevention, making sure that all these controls are working. It's not the most exciting thing, but it is just so critical. And the way that I rationalize that is just look at the attacks that have happened in the past. I have a bit of a habit. Anytime there's any information on one, I will, research it. And I was going to say 9 times out of 10, but it's not. It's literally every time. It would be one of these fundamental controls just was missing.
Yeah, and we talk about this. Remember the basics. Just remember the basics all the time. And you've got you come from infrastructure background. Money's always goes hand in hand with infrastructure, as it with all areas of tech. But is this paradox actually is it actively fueled by these endless vendors selling the fear of the exotic? Because as you've touched on to some degree, just fixing boring foundational IT hygiene, it's not really there to monetize too easily.
I think they definitely play a part. There's a reason it's called a hype cycle, for one. And everyone's looked at that, the diagram of every single cybersecurity company, or a huge number of them, and all the different categories that they fall into. And if you actually look at all of those different categories, I think it's always interesting to think, okay, well, which of those categories are really going to, push the dial to protecting, an organization? And I think if you look at the cold hard truth, it isn't actually that many. It is all about, obviously the EDR companies, the patching companies. It is those ones, obviously identity. It's those ones that are actually going to, prevent the attack. And so everything else does obviously serve a purpose. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in business. But it's just getting the how much are they going to be helping you? And there's no problem at all in always wanting to be better and to be finding those edge cases and preventing those, protecting against those edge cases. But don't do that at the sacrifice of the fundamentals. And I think that's a really, really critical piece. It's not to say do not worry about this at all, but just make sure that you're devoting the correct amount of time into the level of the risk.
Absolutely. And staying on, look, these hugely expensive purchases are always lauded and celebrated, the next, as you say, the next big EDR tool, why are we so obsessed with buying these, yet actually incapable of actually deploying them, to 100% of the estate, for example?
It is really a multifaceted problem, which is why it's so difficult to solve in the first place. So, firstly, that people aren't typically rolling out new EDRs all the time. And so it's actually, I think it's more the fact that they're obviously installing them all the time. You've got the lifecycle management. So new EDR agents need to be rolled out. It might not be actually a new, version, but it's just, it needs to be deployed everywhere. And no one wants to go to the board and go, that EDR project that we did like 3 years ago, well, I've actually just realized that we actually haven't rolled it out anywhere near as well as I thought. Is one, there's not sort of a marker. But the bigger issue, it's just purely the visibility. People don't actually see these gaps. What they do is they will normally, most companies that I talk to, they normally use Intune as their single source of truth. And it's a very logical thing to think of. You're like, okay, well, that makes sense. I'm using autopilot. I'm deploying all on my own machines with that. And part of that task is to then push out the EDR. But the problem is that Intune doesn't actually know if the EDR is actually working. All it knows is it has installed an application, and it's done its job. And so what people do is they'll then export the list of all the machines from Intune. They get the software inventory from that, and that will be their comparison. But you only need to sort of take a step back and start thinking of a few gaps, such as, well, what happens if the EDR was installed, but it didn't actually register into the EDR? It's then not working whatsoever. And so then you start getting that false sense of security. Or if you had shadow IT, becoming more and more of a bigger problem. And I think one of the things that's really accelerating the shadow IT is actually shadow AI, because people are wanting these tools. They're incredible and they're using them to improve at their job, which makes sense. But then if there's a block on being able to use it, then what are you going to do? You're going to use your home computer. So I think, and that is, you're not going to see any of that in Intune. And so I really see this problem it's like death by 1,000 cuts. It's not just one big problem. You go, oh, you solve that, done. It's lots of little problems all together, and then when you add it all up, most companies have a quite a significant gap in their cyber hygiene.
That's fascinating stuff. And in terms of attacker realities, let's talk about the last 24, even 12 months. So people love to talk about stories of casinos getting hacked via thermostats within fish tanks, for instance. But you've recently pointed to M&S breach as a real wake-up call. Can you perhaps walk us through what actually happened? How the attacker armed themselves with nothing but good English and a phone call to bypass enterprise-grade security? What really happened, John?
Yeah, so I'd just like to say from the start, I don't have any inside knowledge to this particular attack. So it's only what I've gleaned from the reports that everyone else has no doubt read. But from those, what I can ascertain is that it really was, as you just described, they understood the password reset procedure for an admin. It seems as if the way they would have done that is obviously just try a few times, get different people to phone up and learn of what questions they're asking for. I think that the questions they were asking were actually all information that you could get from social media, like date of birth, location, that sort of thing, where they live. And so that I think they just did their research, understood all that, and then just confidently answered the questions with an English accent, and that was enough. Which, it's just staggering, isn't it? When when you then, going back to Jay's point at the beginning, we're talking about quantum computing and that they're going to break through every single encryption key, and we're actually sort of devoting energy to this, when someone just phoned up and said, yeah, this is me, I need to reset the MFA, can you do that for me? And the list goes on. I mean, look at the Irish Health Office attack. That was another classic. They deployed the new EDR, had them both running in parallel. New one was left in audit only mode, got rid of the old one, and then forgot to actually switch it into protect mode. There's a big PwC report on that. Don't want to know how much that report costs, but buried in it, it basically says that they just didn't switch it on, which again is just it's just staggering, and it does just highlight that, as with most things, you need to have something at a higher level that's actually monitoring these systems, because an EDR and any platform like that, it's not going to tell you you've misconfigured me, or because in a certain point in time, it's not a misconfiguration, i.e. when you install it, if you set it into protect mode, that would have been a misconfiguration. So it's all about the context and the timing. But if you know what good looks like, and you've already told the system that's what it should look like, and then obviously it flags, and it can't be the individual platform, because the checker can't, they can't check their own homework.
That's some great points. Appreciate you sharing. And we've recently seen the Striker attack, where 80,000 devices were wiped using a Microsoft admin tool. No malware required at all. And obviously Jaguar Land Rover supply chain hit that actually moved the needle when it comes to the UK GDP. So, from where you're standing, John, these attacks over the last 12 months, what are the key lessons learned? Where should other leaders perhaps be devoted and paying more attention?
Well, I think the main thing is to look at your risk register, and when you look at that risk register, actually take the time to work out not just what's the do look at what's the likelihood of this attack, and what's the impact. Go back to the basics, and also look at, well, what data do you have that's making you feel confident in those numbers? Because I think all too often, when people go through the exercise, they do see it as like a tick boxing exercise. And so where it's like, they read the thing, oh, you've got EDR, or like, yeah, tick, that's done. That's a low risk. Don't need to worry about that. Have we got, a good password reset process? Of course we have. Yeah, move on to the next. But I think if you're going to go through the exercise, take the time and be critical, and don't, mark it until you've got empirical evidence that is backing up that figure. And if you do that, I would just be very surprised that you're going to think that, quantum computing is going to be at the top of your list as the biggest risk. So yeah, it does get back to those foundations.
I certainly agree with you, and it is a harsh reality. You're seeing a lot of specialists now pivot their focus on quantum, and they forgot about the challenges that we're trying to address right now. And you mentioned data. I understand that Threat Aware's data reveals that on average, 10% of our organizations, enterprise level, their devices are completely undetectable, and a further 30% are perhaps falling silent. So take us into the boardroom. What is it exactly that CISOs or technology leaders, how do they exactly react when you prove to them that a third of their multi-million-pound investment stack is effectively unplugged?
Yeah. So I think, firstly, every organization is different. And obviously the stats that we have, that is the average. And there's some organizations where it is, 1% are missing. And those ones are even more kind of intriguing, because normally in that type of, situation, they're actually even more shocked, because they care so much about the fundamentals, and they appreciate that you need to be, at that 100% mark. But in general, when we highlight this to a CISO, and when they can see that the evidence is there, the first reaction is normally, that can't be right. And that's just human nature. If you're looking at your Intune list and your EDR list, and it's saying that it's, 99% perfect, then obviously that's what you're going to think. And so once they realize that, and okay, there is some solid, evidence here that is not as good as I thought, they're normally very pragmatic people. And so they just want to understand where the fault is and how we get it resolved. One of the bigger problems, though, is that the rest of the board don't share that same concern. And I do see this all too often, and is most, all organizations are run from the top. And if the board don't really care about it, then they are going to be, slashing budgets and maybe not, even giving more budget to get this problem resolved. So that's definitely a major problem. But 9 times out of 10, when you show a security professional this information, once they can see that there is, evidence, and then they can understand how that happened, all they want to do is get it fixed and work out how they can improve those processes and automate it.
I appreciate you sharing. And of course, visibility is useless if teams don't share it. How do you personally encourage IT operations and security operations, out of their protected silos, so they actually collaborate rather than hiding some of the network data from each other?
Yeah, I find this fascinating, actually. There's been so many meetings that I've been a part of, where we're showing Threat Aware, that sometimes I feel like it's the first time that the infrastructure team and the security team have actually had a meeting together. There definitely still seems to be that big wall between them. And in terms of the sharing,
probably is, John.
Sorry, Jay.
It probably is.
Yeah. I think that, I mean, sometimes, the sharing of the data is as simple as, it's purely a licensing thing. The licenses for Qualys and everything are expensive. And if someone doesn't technically need that information, then why are they going to have a license to see it? Obviously, others, it is about the sensitivity of the data, and they're not actually allowed to see that information, depending on the role that they're performing. Especially if it's maybe the people that are doing the deployment of those laptops using autopilot. Why would they need to see the sensitive information? So I think the rationale for that is sensible. I think where the problem lies is where I see it, where the security team end up being the report writers, and all these different departments are asking them for all these different reports, and it's just such a colossal waste of their talent and their time. And so if you're able to have a system where the correct information is available in a secure way for the relevant parties, then no one needs to write any reports. They can just, see the data, and they can create their own reports that they need. This is definitely something that people don't, recognize at the start when you go down a journey of looking at a cyber hygiene platform or something like that, is that it's actually going to stop you having to do all those tedious reports, and you're going to work much better as an actual team and recognize each other's challenges. And so, yeah.
I appreciate you sharing. And I know we've asked the biggest F up question, but is there what's the biggest F up you've seen or heard of in most recent times? Not personally been involved of, but observed from afar, or perhaps a peer shared with you.
Yeah, I mean, there is quite a long list, isn't there? When you think about it, I mean, the Irish Health Office one was definitely, that's not good. But for recent times, I mean, I think it has to be the McDonald's hiring app.
Mm-hmm.
So there was, I think it's called literally McDonald's hiring app. The username and the password for this system, which had all of the information on every single applicant for every McDonald's job. So 65 million people, and the username was 123456, and the password was 123456 for the admin console of that platform. I'd say that's got to be up there.
It's a tough one to beat, that.
Big mess.
Tough one.
I mean, it's just mind blowing. But I mean, there was that SolarWinds catastrophe, and I think that they had like the source code or something had been in a FTP site, and the password for that was SolarWinds 123. I mean, it is just insane that when people are typing that out, surely something's going through your mind. This isn't a good idea.
Yeah, I've even within the last 24 hours, without naming them, one of the largest sort of AI providers, one of their staff leaked their source code 24 hours ago on GitHub. So I think it's got over 2,000 star reviews already. It's a lot of features that aren't available to the general public that perhaps people are going to be rolling out in the next 24 hours. More on that in another episode.
Yeah, I read about that this morning. Insane.
So look, let's talk a little bit about the impact of AI on the workforce. So Warren and I talk about this tirelessly, and I think genuinely think that probably the rise of AI, and certainly over the last couple of years, has had quite a big impact on people's decisions in terms of growth and where they're going in the workforce, and certainly from a company's perspective, who do they employ, what skills do they employ. Let's talk about vibe coding first of all. Let's talk about how developers are prompting AI until the code seemingly works. Are we building a fragile digital infrastructure where literally nobody understands the underlying logic of our our critical systems?
Yeah, I mean, it is just a huge problem, isn't it? And I think that we're probably not going to see the fallout of it for a few months. But I am already hearing some of the large companies are actually having to go back and change some of the things that they rolled out because they realised that it was the code just wasn't up to scratch, and I think it's going to be worse industry by industry. Where you are, when you're in the security industry, obviously it's that the code has to be robust and highly secure. I feel that from in other industries, when they're already not that great in tech in the first place, and now they think that they've got this shortcut. And then you can tell that the boardroom are going to be, oh my God, this is amazing. I don't need to employ all these expensive people. It's just I think it's so clear that people are going to rush at this, and we're going to, we're going to see some disasters. I can't see it being any other way. I'm not saying that every organization out there that's using vibe coding is creating a disaster, because that's just not the case at all. I think it's actually the inverse. That any company that's not using vibe coding within their development team are going to be left, in the dust. But it's how you use it and what process do you follow, and that process has to be robust.
Yeah. And a balance, like everything, it's got. And you staying on that, you warned, about agentic AI and shifting how we view outages. Do we think, staying on this toxic theme, if we will, do we think we're entering an era where companies are treating these massive AI-driven sort of network failures as just acceptable collateral damage, just to stay relevant, just to stay in the AI race?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm actually, I'm interviewing people lots, just constantly, and people that I've spoken to, they've literally said that the companies are just becoming a lot more, as long as they're getting rapid deployment, that they're happy to accept some outages. Which just feels like such a colossal backward step. I mean, I'm obviously like pre-Google time, and it used to be really difficult to make systems that had really high uptime. If you ever wrote that you had like 99.99% uptime, people were like, really? And it was a real effort. And then obviously cloud came about, and that wasn't perfect. But once that matured, getting that near 100% uptime has become the norm. And that we are now so reliant on technology. When it does go down, it does cause colossal impact to day-to-day life. And so having a mindset where outages are acceptable, that cannot become the norm, in my opinion.
No. And we've talked about some of the roles that we think are going to be impacted by AI. You yourself, ThreatAware is launching an AI-powered security workspace. But in terms of the workforce, with AI handling these complex orchestrations, do we, as we think, look at level 1, level 2 SOC analysts, and are these roles that are going to be antiquated very quickly in the next few years?
I mean, I think the entire workforce is going to change beyond all recognition in the next sort of 2 to 5 years. I think that any role where you are, monitoring alerts and then acting upon them, like a SOC 1 analyst, it does seem very unlikely that those roles are going to remain. I just can't see it happening. And so, yeah, we as we all know in the industry and just the wider economy, these are going to be huge challenges that we're going to be facing. And
you used to run an MSP. If you were in a situation now where you had the opportunity to build one from the ground up, knowing what AI can bring to the table, how would your commercial model, and certainly staying on the workforce theme, how would your human headcount ratio look compared to maybe 10 years ago?
Yeah, it would be very, very different. I think if you look at just the sort of just the standard, level 1, level 2 engineers with the type of problems that they would be facing, you would imagine that, you could probably, it feels like you could do a 5x, maybe even a 10, because, the AI is going to be so good at answering and coming up with the right solution every single time. I mean, you just used to burn so much time trying to solve a particular problem. That's just not going to happen. Then in terms of the level of automation now, if you see it as if you're creating one huge machine, and so every element that needs to be happening, the creation of the users, the decommissioning of the users, the laptops, everything else, that's just going to be one seamless automated system. But then you would have to double down on the security, on the trust. So I think you'd be getting a lot more people actually who are far more security experts in that sort of kind of realm. And then also, I think you'd get a lot of service, sort of professional service business from helping to empower your clients using AI, AI enablement roles. I think these are going to be huge in general. And, the smaller businesses don't have access to that type of thing, and that would 10x them. So I think it would shift a lot in that way. But yeah, the headcount would look, very, very different. And like most, less on the entry roles and a lot more in the more senior roles, which is a really sad thing. I'm not happy about that situation, but that is the reality that we're facing.
And John, appreciate you don't have a magic ball. We've been certainly shopping around for one ourselves, but looking ahead, you're interviewing individuals, you're looking at talent in the market, and as you've rightly outlined, some of those lower level roles perhaps might disappear. So what core skills do you look for in new employees, and what's fundamentally going to help our listeners ensure that they're ahead of the market moving forward?
Attitude. It is still the ultimate winner, I think. Someone's attitude and their desire to learn, their curiosity, and being a team player. I think that those are the most important attributes, because we're going through such rapidly changing times that you need to have a very kind of like nimble mindset that's able to appreciate that, okay, well, we were doing it this way today, but tomorrow we're going to do it completely differently, and be able to, handle that. And not everyone can. Some people find change very difficult. And you need to quickly get out of that mindset.
Appreciate you sharing.
And look, just sort of talking about Cyber Leaders Summit, we see we see the value in so many of these more intimate events. But at the upcoming sort of summit, you're going to be surrounded by a lot of industry heavyweights. It's a nice behind closed doors, away from all the vendor madness. What are the actual conversations that these leaders are going to be having? What do you think they're going to, the most pertinent in terms about failures and the frustrations?
Yeah, I mean, I think really it's going to be around the topic we're talking about right now. There's obviously budgets are still getting squeezed. The massive shift to agentic AI, the impact that's having on their team, and also the shadow AI risk that's becoming more and more. I think these are, and they kind of all play into each other, don't they? Because you're getting budget being squeezed, so then it's like, okay, well, let's move everything to AI, but then you've got all of the risk that's coming from that, and the risk side of things. That's really been. I've been so intrigued of that recently, and it will be interesting to see what others are thinking around this. But I kind of feel that if you're using an agent, or if you're using Claude Cowork or something like that, then all of a sudden that security doesn't matter. because the agent's doing it, and you can just hook in your 365 and hook in this and hook in that because it's an AI system. Whereas you roll back 5 years, and if you ask, oh, can I just get an API key just to connect into this, or I'm just going to connect my email into this random system, it would not be happening. But I feel that now it's kind of, oh, it's fine, it's not a problem, and so that is I think that's going to become another huge issue.
Complacency kills for sure, and just staying on that, in terms of the event, the intimacy of cyber leaders is what makes it so special, and certainly it's essential for service providers and security leaders to have that now. What advice would you give to other people that are considering attending?
I think with most things like that, it is it's being around like-minded people that are facing the same challenges that you're facing, and being able to have that open forum with Chatham House rules, so that you can really get deep into the problems that you're facing. And normally when that happens, you realise that there's at least another 50% of the people there are facing the exact same challenge. So it does work as a support network, and give you those ideas of how to tackle problems, because there will be everyone's come from different backgrounds and different experiences, and so collectively there will be some great ideas there on how to move forward.
Appreciate you sharing there, John. Now, let's talk about the Founders Masterclass. There are, of course, founders such as yourself that are in our audience, and FreightAware has just raised a massive multi-million-pound investment. Tell us a little bit more about that, as well as perhaps some of the brutal truths around raising itself.
I mean, in terms of sort of how we went about that, I heard this advice years and years ago, probably like 10 years ago. And someone said to me, it's always important just to be meeting with investors, even if you have no inclination to actually invest. And when we started, we have been bootstrapped from the beginning. We really didn't have any desire to seek investment. But I took that advice on anyway. So I just which is occasionally meeting out with different investors. So about 3 to 4 years before we actually did the raise, I already had a pretty good network of investors. When I actually looked back at the database I had, it was actually 70 investors that I'd been talking to over that period. And then we actually pitched to 35 different companies. And we did it all ourselves instead of seeking external help for that. And I think that it is critical to kind of speak to such a high number, because it's such an important relationship that you're moving into, and you have to have alignment. When we met One Peak, it was clear from the very beginning that there was just such great synergy between us, and shared values. And obviously, with lots of the other 70, there weren't, and that's just the reality. It depends what each organisation's striving for and what their values are.
That's great. Well, congratulations to you and the team, of course. And I understand that you're using some of that capital to aggressively expand in North America. Now, how does scaling an organisation at breakneck speed? How do you do that without breaking your engineering culture? How do you stop your team from building flashy features just to hit some of those growth metrics that the VC may put in place, for instance?
Yeah, well, this actually goes back to the partner that you select, and so that was one of the most important and the great things about One Peak, which is they are a growth investor. So they're not looking to, suddenly create the next, crazy AI company that's just burning through cash at all risk. It's about having controlled growth, that you are, taking the right bets. Obviously, you've still got to take, big risks and move forward, but it's doing it in a controlled way. And so right now what we're doing is we're bolstering the fundamentals, we're bolstering the engineering team, and making sure that the foundation is set for the growth, not the other way around. And I think that's just important. It's always important to get perception. Obviously, when you've got so many businesses nowadays, and the population in general, everything's just huge. So obviously, you're always going to have a few outliners. The likes of Lovable and Bolt and the others that have just now they've made 100 million ARR in like 3 months. But you have to appreciate how many companies there are in the world, and that and not to be viewing yourself against them, because it's just not realistic. And I think that's important for most founders to recognise.
No, most definitely. And sort of brilliant engineers that are listening today, be sure to obviously follow the team at ThreatAware for the roles that come out in the future, and connect with John on LinkedIn.
Yeah, on that subject, actually, not just engineers. So if you in marketing, engineering, sales, all of our roles are on threataware.com/careers. So do take a look through those and apply if you're looking for a really exciting career in cyber.
That's brilliant. And one last question from a founder masterclass standpoint. A lot of leaders that I work with, and aspiring security leaders that want to transition, start their own business, they shy away from founder-led sales. So from your perspective, how important is that?
I think that at the very beginning, I can't see there's any other way. I used to really enjoy it. I used to love it. I'm not a salesperson at all, as you know. I'm from infrastructure, but it's fun, and learning new things, learning new skills. And so, I think it's the only way to be done. I think what's important to recognise, though, is that you want to, is kind of as quickly as possible, move away from that and recognise that there's going to be way better people than you at selling, and get those experts in place, and make sure you've actually got a repeatable model that can scale without you. And I think that's crucial. But it is all about the timing. There's so many, and I'm certainly not the expert. I'm one person who's gone a certain route, and this is going well. But every business is different, and so I think it's probably more important to do what you think is the right way of doing things, and not actually trying to do things just because someone else said it. You got to, like we said right at the start, you've got to learn from those mistakes, and that is the best way of learning, for sure.
That's brilliant.
And look, a little bit about yourself, John. Yeah, we've talked. Certainly know that you've expressed your love for mountain biking. Not the safest of sports. There's certainly a physical danger to those. And how does navigating that sort of that physicality and the risks associated with that, how does that shape your psychology as a startup founder? When dealing with the everyday risks of running your own business?
Yes, I think firstly, let's put this in perspective. I'm definitely no downhill champ. You're not going to see me in the next Red Bull Rampage or anything. But I think that there obviously is a large element of being able to take risks when you're starting a business, and everyone approaches that in different ways. Personally, the way I look at it is, I always think, what's the very worst that can happen, and then go, okay, well, if worst case scenario is everything's going to go wrong, and I'm going to have to go and get another job, but then looking at what options you have, and then deciding, okay, this is the best route, and I think this is going to work, and have confidence in that, and then just go for it. You can't sort of live life kind of like worrying about things. Anything can go wrong, and so I think sometimes it's overemphasized, to be honest. I think that loads and loads of people could do it. It's not that amazing. It's just about, sometimes it's about the timing, the luck. But yeah, if you've got an idea, got some conviction, just go for it.
Absolutely. And look, mental resilience. It's something we talk about a lot. It's key. It's certainly in cyber. You've previously mentioned the tennis and your family life. What else helps you to maintain that sort of balance and resilience? And does how else can you avoid burning out? Because certainly this is an issue for a lot of fellow professionals.
I do think exercise is absolutely critical. I try and sort of go to the gym, go for a run at least 3 times a week. Always aiming for that 5. It never seems to happen, but aiming for 5, but happy with 3. But I do think that I think the cardio aspect of that. I've been testing different things recently because it has been a stressful time. So like just hitting the rowing machine, just like really, really hard, just for like 5 minutes, to the point where you think you're going to die. But I think that apparently is when you release stress, that's actually what gets rid of the cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And so I do think that is really important. I quit drinking about 7 years ago. I don't know how much of an impact that's had, but I certainly feel a lot better for it. And I think sleep would help, but I don't get enough of that, so I can't tell you if that.
Sleep's at a premium for all of us. I think that's just getting older. I can relate. And look, to close us out, if there's other founders that could take some advice listening to this, and could overhaul maybe one single process tomorrow to escape the sophistication paradox that we've talked about, what's that one step that they need to take?
I definitely think it is, as I mentioned earlier, looking at that risk register and looking at it with a fresh perspective, and really questioning, okay, is every control exactly where I think it is at that level, and why? And I think once you then go through that process and you write down all of those risks, I will be absolutely staggered if quantum computing is going to be at the top of that list.
Fair enough. And look, to finish off, you tell us a bit more about Threat Aware, your vision and your mission and purpose, and what the future holds for you guys.
Yeah, so our vision from the beginning has always been to simplify cybersecurity, and now with the age of AI, we're in it. That has never been more applicable, because I see that the challenges that everyone is facing, they need to be able to understand exactly what the AI is doing, especially when you're looking at the kind of like low code, no code technology, where you've set off these agentic AI systems. You have to be able to completely understand what are they interacting with and what have they done. And that's what I'm just so excited about with what we're building now with the AI security workspace. It's obviously all built in the foundation of the Threat Aware platform, but gives you the ability to connect into any data feed through AI. You can then manipulate the data through our logic engine. And the beauty of that is it's all in the diagram format, so you can clearly see what the AI is doing. Then we have the actions. So the actions are outside of the application. So again, you can see exactly what actions the AI is taking. And then finally, you've got the interface builder. And that's within a hardened sandbox that it cannot escape from. And so even if there was some bad code or malware or something horrible that had been created in that, which is non-impossible, but if it did happen, it still cannot get out anywhere because of this structure of the system that we've created. And it's we're just about to be putting it into preview mode, and a few of our clients have already started using it. And looking at their reaction, looking at what they've been able to build. It's been, just absolutely brilliant. I cannot wait to be showing the wider public this in the next few months.
Amazing.
Sounds fascinating, and we'd love to have you back once it does come public, showcase that to our audience and community members, John.
Oh, thank you. That'd be amazing.
Absolutely. Well, look, John, amazing job. Thank you so much for your insight. If anyone of our listeners want to stay connected with you, obviously LinkedIn, of course. Anything else that you can maybe suggest where they can reach out to you?
No, I'm an old man. I'm not on any social media whatsoever. So LinkedIn is the place to find me. And do again if you're looking for a role, check out threataware.com/careers. Thank you, Warren. Thank you, Jay. It's been really enjoyable.
Amazing. Listen, John, thank you. I'm sure the community, all our listeners, will have loved the episode. If people want to continue the discussion, you know where to come. Secure CyberConnect community, where we offer all our solutions for tech and security professionals at no cost. Thanks, everybody.